Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another version of the FPL Community Q&A, where every week I am joined by another one of your favorite content creators to discuss everything FPL from the previous game week and onto the next game weeks. If you don't already, please can you drop me a follow over on Twitter? The page is up on screen there, and the links are in the description. Just before we get into all of it, our stream sponsor, Fantasy Football Hub. Again, there's a link in the description for you all. If you want to go and sign up, we will look at a lot of their stats and things if we need to during the streams. And if you like what you see, the link is down there for you all. So we have created a YouTube only league, which is nice to finally. I feel like we've been talking about it for a while to review how people are doing. In a respectable eighth position out of what's looking like almost 100 people in there now. Great score on top from Dale Thomas with 91. Salah captain, of course. He had Podence in there, Reece James as well, Robertson. So some very nice players in there for him. But guys, let me know where you are in the league, in the chat, how it's all going and what your game week one scores were, and anything you want us to discuss going into the stream. But without any further ado, today's guest, if you don't already know him, is JNO FPL, or probably better known, depending on where you follow him, in FPL Today. All of his links and everything are in the description below. His pages are up on screen now for you all. So go and make sure you check him out if you don't already. Good evening.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to come on,
No,
have a chat with your subscribers.
yeah, no, good to have you on. Good to get into. Feels like we've been waiting for game week one to come around for a long time, and it is finally here.
Yeah, I can stress a little bit less now because I can only make three transfers a week now if I'm taking hits. So it's not a whole team overhaul like during pre-season where I keep tinkering every day. So yeah, it's nice to have started.
Yeah, it definitely is. So we'll get straight into it. We've got your team up on screen here. A great start for you, 86. Very pleased with it, I imagine.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. As well as the fact that I was, and I'll just say, no mistakes made by anyone that did captain Aubameyang. I was on Aubameyang as captain for most of pre-season, and then literally changed it. I think Thursday or Friday, and yeah, I managed to get that right, which of course is a massive difference for the game week. But a few other picks in there that probably weren't in any of my drafts either, like Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Callum Wilson, who also did the business for me. So yeah, overall, very pleased.
Yeah, I had I mean, actually looking at our teams are very similar. You had Wilson in where I had Suchek is the big difference in what made that 6 point swing. But
Yeah.
Calvert-Lewin feels like a nice one because his fixtures, Spurs was a bit. If he can get anything out of that game, then great. But his fixtures afterwards are really nice, so it was good to get that 8 pointer from him and see how well Everton played. But yeah, 80 for me. That captain on Salah was very sweet, having been on Aubameyang for most of pre-season. And I hate to say it, but if Salah was the early kickoff and Aubameyang kicked off at 5:30, it could well have been the other way around. I hate the early kickoff captain, especially in game week one, because I think if my first ever match in FPL this season, I captain and he blanks, it's just not a good setup for the rest of the season. So yeah. Any thoughts on? I know. So one big thing for me was I had Martial on my bench. Um, so I've got him ready for game week two, which I suppose was why I had Suchek, where you had
Yeah.
Wilson and a bit like that, and you had Son. Are you planning on getting in your Man U assets game week two?
See, that was always the plan, but then with Salah having scored the hat trick, there's a small part of me that's tempted to keep him because the plan was always to use Salah and downgrade to Bruno Fernandes. I did tinker with Greenwood as being my bench player in game week one, but then all that news about the England international kind of put me off a little bit. So the plan was Bruno Fernandes in for Salah because I believe I don't particularly plan on captaining Salah until something like game week six. Uh, yeah,
Mm,
so game week four he does have Aston Villa away, but Salah's away record isn't amazing. And then it's
no.
game week seven where he's got West Ham at home, which is one I definitely want to captain in. But apart from that, there wasn't really any fixtures that massively jumped out. It's Arsenal at home in game week 3. Again, he could do something in that, but I'll probably put the captaincy armband somewhere else. In game week 6 against Sheffield United at home, but again, probably put the captaincy armband on someone else. So the plan was to get Salah out, and then of course, as soon as your player scores a hat trick, it gets very difficult to carry on with that plan. So I might just hold. I might have no Man United asset, which is a bit scary. But Crystal Palace didn't look terrible, and I hear a lot of injury news coming out of the Man United camp, so I don't know what starting 11 they're necessarily going to be playing.
Mm.
So I might just hold. Team's done well so far. Hopefully it'll do well next week, and then I could use 2 free transfers and then maybe take a hit. If I take 2 hits, that's 4 transfers in total. So I haven't made my decision yet.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm quite fortunate with having Martial, but I agree with you. I think there was too much speculation around Greenwood to go with him game week 1. He was the one who I had in my drafts throughout the summer, and I thought he would be such good value. And if he does start, he will be. But I just felt like there is a chance that Van de Beek affects the formation. There's also a chance that we're going to get Sancho still to come in. So I just felt when the deadline came around, there was just so much speculation on it. And now my front three of Werner, Martial, Calvert-Lewin, I really like that. And I think going forward over the next few fixtures, that hopefully is going to be quite strong. That game week 4 one is an interesting one with Salah as captain, but then City are away at Leeds. So if you've got, I'm planning on the Aubameyang, still planning on Aubameyang to De Bruyne or to Sterling, depending on where I decide, then that's sort of a captaincy in itself. But
Yeah.
I actually plan on keeping Salah and getting rid of Aubameyang for it going that way around. But I want that City asset, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. As soon as game week 3 comes around, a City player
Yeah.
will be coming into my side, most likely for Aubameyang.
Mm.
So I've got the same plan for game week 3 as you do. But then, of course, if I hold, I then can maybe keep Salah. Uh, just it's funny how you have plans and then the season starts and suddenly it all changes. Because I think the only 2 safe Man United players for me are Bruno Fernandes
Mm.
and Martial. Those are the 2 I'd be confident no matter who they sign will still be part of that starting 11. I mean, Rashford, you'd imagine, wouldn't be dropped, but he's kind of a price point that's a bit awkward for me. And of course, Greenwood is a bit of a worry. So, yeah, I have a feeling that maybe being a bit more flexible with this game week 2 and then making the moves in game week 3 might be the best move for me. But we'll see. Of course, we still got the cup games to come.
Yeah.
Of course, we could still get news. Current times, we never know who's going to be out of game week 2.
Yeah.
So I don't want to use my transfer early. I know a lot of people have,
Mm.
and I completely understand team value is an important part of the game, especially this early on. But I want to have my transfer in case I need it.
Yeah. So I planned on rolling my free transfer, but I actually think I'm going to use it ahead of game week 2. Now, my plan is to take out Vinagre and bring in Saiss. So I have the 500,000 in the bank. I wouldn't play Saiss game week 2. I'd put him on my bench. But with Vinagre potentially dropping this week and Saiss rising, that's a zero point 0.2 swing, which I'm not really sure I want to
Yeah.
be zero point 0.2 behind this early in the season. Game week 1 already zero point 0.2 behind, and then it would be a transfer technically I couldn't make. I mean, I'd free up the money by going Aubameyang to De Bruyne, but I know looking at those Wolves fixtures, I really feel like I need a Wolves defender in my team. Game week 3 onwards, their fixtures look really nice. So my plan was, I'm going to hold it. Whatever happens, I'm going to hold it. And now one game week comes and your plans completely change. I don't know why we go into game week 1 with any sort of plan because it
Well,
literally
exactly.
literally changes straight away.
Well, yeah, we're playing with very little information. We
Mm.
can all talk about how Project Restart went, how it was. It wasn't that long ago, so on and so forth. But everything can change. New transfers in, teams' form changes. So yeah, I think it's always good to have a plan. But yeah, the likelihood of you sticking to it, especially early doors, is pretty slim.
Yeah, definitely. Welcome to the guys in the chat. Kaustab, Eric, Friends People Focus, Nuclear. Welcome everyone. Some good scores in there. We've got a 79, a 70, a few others in there. So good to see everyone starting strongly. I mean, overall rank game week one means very little. I always try and be in the top 1 million, just a sort of benchmark. But if you're outside it, it doesn't really mean very much. I think come game week five is when you maybe start thinking about where you're sitting, but still, it's very insignificant this early in the season. I'm 8 points away from being in the top 50K and being outside the top 1 million. So it's a big swing, however you go. So one game we can change it all very very quickly. So if I just pull up our fixtures from this week, we'll just sort of go through them and anyone have a quick sort of discussion about the teams. We start the early Saturday kickoff. Arsenal Fulham. We all both had Aubameyang in our teams. He scored. The others of Willian, I suppose. Willian is one that is getting a lot of talking, a lot of people talking about ahead of the future game weeks. But taking your fancy at 8 million, I know you've got Son. Could that be a move for you?
I mean, it could. Willian was always a player that I have been considering because I thought going to this Arsenal side, he may be given a more important role than he kind of had at Chelsea.
Mm.
I always feel like at Chelsea he was playing second fiddle to Eden Hazard. So I was interested. He looked good in that game. My issue is with my kind of approach. I want to make sure I've got certain teams covered, which I think have high goal potential in most games. And Arsenal don't really hit the top four for me in that regard. I kind of look at the likes of Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool, and Man City as the teams that can really turn over another side and get 4 or 5 goals in a game. Whereas Arsenal don't necessarily feel like that kind of side to me. I know they scored three, but it is against Fulham.
Mm.
But Willian is definitely someone I've looked at because he was very important in that game for them. Looked really good on set pieces. Bellerin was also someone that I thought he got rather far forward in that game as well. So he's not at too bad a price point. So alongside of Aubameyang, those are probably the two players I'll be looking at in the Arsenal side. Gabriel also looked pretty good and solid in defence.
Yeah, he did. I think I'd agree. I also worry with Willian that we know that Arteta isn't afraid to rotate that front three with the likes of Nketiah. We've got Nketiah, Lacazette, Saka, Pepe, Willian rotating for two positions. It does just kind of feel like he's not going to play every game. I just don't see that happening, especially when they've got Europe. I know they're in Europa League, so they may not play. They may rotate in that rather than the Premier League. But I just still think that his lineups are so unpredictable anyway that when they've got that many wingers, that it could just go horribly wrong for you. He's a nice price. I think 8 million is definitely sort of worth considering for him. But
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. But
yeah,
it's that fear of rotation because the likes of Saka were playing very well.
yeah,
And he even did well in the Community Shield, or whatever it's called nowadays. So
yeah.
I would worry about rotation. And I think if you see the fixtures look nice for Arsenal, your main priority is always going to be Aubameyang.
Yeah, if you've got the likes of Saka, presumably you'd be selling him. I think some of those will get onto them on Leeds, but their 5.5 mid price midfielders look really nice, and probably if I when I eventually move on from St Maximin, is probably where I'm going to go. They look like good value for money. Those 5 mil. It's Harrison and Klitsch, I think, are the two.
Yeah, I think I just need a little bit more
Mm,
info on that side because they were playing Liverpool and they clearly were up for that game. I now want to see what they can do against lower sides because I think there will be some sides that would have watched that game and gone, okay, they play very attacking football. We might have to sit back, and then I want to see how they can break down a side that might play defensively. I also worry about points being shared around a lot in that side because no one really stood out underlying stats wise. A lot of players look good. I literally have a short list of Leeds players, and I'm watching them all now.
mm.
But I'm not sure anyone will stand head and shoulders above the rest, which is my worry. And you kind of want players that, when that goal alert comes in for that side, you're like,
Yeah,
oh, it's going to be Vardy
mm.
for Leicester, or it's going to be Aubameyang for
Yeah.
Arsenal, or someone like that. And I'm not sure Leeds have that player. So I'm
No.
excited about that Leeds side. It's got value, but I just don't know which way I'm going as far as which player to go for.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. But Fulham at the weekend could be another good indication for them.
Yes.
10 of you guys watching, please let me know how your game weeks went. How did your game week ones go? Any transfer plans? Also, if you could drop a like on the video while you're watching here, that would be really appreciated. Um, so a few questions that are coming in in the chat about whether we've got. So if we start with Leno on Arsenal, do we think at 5 million they looked much better defensively? Is that a way in because they've got so many centre backs? Do we think that Leno at 5 mil? I kind of wish I'd gone. I have McCarthy, who I'm not overly pleased with. Looking at how Southampton defended game week one, it feels like the same in goalkeeper and in defenders that they've actually priced them quite well. That extra 500,000 in goal, and as well as the 4.5 to the 5 mil defenders, is actually worth investing.
I'd have to agree because the other options, Ryan, and Ryan didn't look
No.
particularly amazing either. Um, I'm so used to 4.5
Yeah.
as a goalkeeper. I'm not sure I could bring myself to 5. And Martinez apparently is going to Villa, and a Villa goalkeeper doesn't really excite me either. So I really want to see what Leeds do against smaller sides because their keeper's 4.5, I
Yeah.
believe. And it might end up that I go that route.
Hmm.
If I was going to go up to 5, Ramsdale didn't really impress.
No.
So Leno could be an option. I'm not really that versed in the 5 minute goalkeepers though, because it's not a tactic I generally use.
No, I tend to go for a 4.5, and I did again this season. I wonder, Martinez at Villa could be an interesting one. They were much better defensively at the latter end of last season. He is a much better goalkeeper than they were playing during that time. I suppose I just want to see if they were better defensively because they had to be, or because they've changed something,
Yeah.
and whether that's something that is likely to stay. I nearly went with Pickford in goal. I can't believe I say it after actually how good a goalkeeper I think he is. But Everton looked really good, and we'll get to them. But at 5 million, it's not bad with their opening fixtures. But I wouldn't advise anyone to make a goalkeeper transfer this early on, especially.
Yeah.
So
You
just
save it for your wild card, I'd say.
yeah, just stick with what you've got. Maybe when it comes around, we can have a re-evaluation, but there's not too much to talk about on it at the moment. Um, so next we've got Palace Southampton, 1-0 Palace, both of us with McCarthy in goal. Just heads dropped when that went in. He was also one save away from getting a save point as well. And that save point could have potentially got him a bonus as well. So it was very close for him, but I felt like that was a really good opening fixture. And if they'd have had a bad, if I'd have seen that they weren't going to keep a clean sheet game week one, maybe I wouldn't have gone with him. I know I pick a goalkeeper for a long while, but I was wanting that game week one good start from him. Anyone in that game taking your fancy?
I mean, to be fair to me, it was a bit slim pickings that game. Unfortunately, I don't get to watch all games because work and things like that. So often my notes come from like match of the day and whatever other footage I can find. Um, I would say Zaha looked good on the counter, but I feel like Southampton were leaving him plenty of space behind, and their defence wasn't particularly fast enough to keep up. But literally, Zaha was the only one that really got my attention, and that's more of a one to watch if he does continue
Yeah.
to play as a striker. Ings and Che Adams could have scored. Just you'd hope for more chances from them in that game than they actually did get. But the two
Yeah.
chances they had, one at each, were very good chances. So if I had one of those two and I didn't have planned transfers for them, because I know a lot of people were looking at Ings to Martial. So if you have that as a
Yeah.
plan, I can't argue against it. But if you didn't have a plan for either one of those, there's a good chance
Mm.
that they do still score goals in the next couple of game weeks. So I wouldn't be too worried. But defensively, yeah, if Palace are causing them trouble, I'm
Yeah.
assuming against Spurs they're going to be a bit more defensively solid. But it's a bit worrying when Palace are getting behind you that often in
Yeah,
defence.
definitely. I think a few asking, is Che Adams a good option? I think at 6 million he's still a good option. I think he's one of the better options at that price. I prefer him to Mitrovic.
I think
Fulham looked
until
really
the
odd.
likes of Wilson came
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
when Wilson came in, that was when I was like, okay, now do I need Che Adams?
Hmm.
Before that, it was Che Adams or Mitrovic, and of course Mitrovic didn't even start.
Yeah.
So I definitely wouldn't say Che Adams is a terrible pick.
Mm.
And it's one game. We need to remind ourselves we can analyse this first game week as much as we want, but it's only one game week,
Exactly.
and everything could change after game week two.
Exactly. If you have a player who has one bad game week, it's game week 17. You don't care nearly as much. It's just because it's game week one. I did have Adams as well, and then I switched to a four at the back and went with my big three up front, which is why he went out. I just thought, I went with Edna Stevens in Sheffield United, and I thought I prefer him as an option for the first three than Che Adams. I mean, they both didn't do anything, so it wasn't much of a decision, but it allowed me that big front three. So, but yeah, I think people forget how good defensively Crystal Palace can be. We saw it during last season how good they were. We were all jumping on their defence just before Christmas, and they kept sort of four clean sheets in a row. They had a really bad end of the season, but that was partly because they were safe. I
Yeah,
think
they
people
didn't care
did
anymore.
forget. Yeah, people do forget how good they can be, and they're not just suddenly going to not be. So I wasn't too surprised to see them defend so well at the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's value in that side. I think right now I've got Mitchell, and unfortunately,
Mm.
he could have come on as a sub for me, but he didn't because I didn't put him high enough. But then when not Johnson, Ferguson, that's the one. I'm thinking of West Ham's right back, and I won't go West Ham for sure.
No.
But yeah, Ferguson comes back from injury, seems to be, as far as Palace fans are concerned, the guy that will play right back, which is another cheap defender. So definitely some value there at Palace.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that by the time he comes back, it'll be the perfect time for me to get rid of Justin when he loses his place and go to Ferguson. That's the hope,
Yeah,
but unlikely things run quite that smoothly when it comes to it. Nothing ever does. Um, so next one, I think we can spend a bit of time on this. We're both very happy with it. Is Liverpool Leeds. Um, I have Trent and Salah in my team. I wasn't pleased with Trent. I know it's game week one, and I'm not going to sell him, but the lack of corners he took was quite a little bit of a concern for me.
yeah. From what I only saw highlights again, but from what I read, there's the possibility that Leeds were targeting Trent as a player that they needed to make sure didn't get much of the ball and
Mm,
didn't affect the game, which seemed to work in Salah's favour. But if that is the case, then I'm happy to wait and see on him. But it does seem like Robertson now has been given more responsibility as far as set pieces. He looked good, Project Restart. He's now looking good at the start of this season, and he's that 0.5 million cheaper. I mean, if you're going to double up, then it doesn't really matter if you're going for those two.
yeah,
But Robertson is capable of getting similar points
yeah,
to Trent, which, if this trend continues, that's going to start to be a decision that's going to be
yeah,
you're going to have to make. Are you going to stick with Trent, or are you going to go? Because Van Dijk also looked dangerous. I know he made the mistake, which resulted in the Leeds goal, but he could have had two goals
yeah,
potentially in that game if it wasn't for the foul on a Leeds player when he was winning that second header. So there's options in that Liverpool defence that will score points. It's just whether they'll score as many as Trent.
mm,
And the early signs from that game aren't particularly great. But I doubt many other teams will target Trent as much as Leeds did, if that's what they did, from what I read.
yeah.
So I'm happy to wait and see on that one.
Yeah, I think it's a wait and see. It's a bit much to sell him straight away, but if the trend continues that Robertson's on corners from both sides, for example, then it is something that probably does need
Yeah.
to be considered. But not a transfer that I'm definitely not looking to do at the moment. In terms of Liverpool attack, okay, great. We both had Salah and captained him. A lot of people, there were plenty of people who went with Mane in their teams. I'm not pleased with how it went. He didn't look to get in it that much, which was quite strange from what we've seen from him. But he just didn't seem to be involved. I know. I mean, okay,
Do
Salah
you mean
scored two
Mane, yeah?
penalties and one was at Mane. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Um, sorry.
So
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about Salah, and
Salah
I'm
scored a
like, he did all right for me. But no, okay.
no, no, Mane. I mean, Salah scored two pens and a great finish. I still wouldn't be making the swap if I owned Mane to Salah. I feel like it's with them. You just got to stick and own one.
No, I agree. I think just because they've been priced the same, can you really go Mane with penalties? And there's been
Yeah,
a lot of talk now about how there might be even more penalties than last season. So if that is the case, I just can't see if you're only picking one. I can understand if you're picking both, but
yeah,
at the beginning of the season, that seems a bit much when there's so many other options in that premium
yeah,
price range. But yeah, for me, you have to go Salah at the
yeah,
moment. Mane might do
yeah,
more away from home than Salah, but that's why you've got the captaincy to put on other players, and then you can put the captaincy armband on Salah when he's at home. So for me,
yeah,
I'm kind of happy it's gone this way because it kind of justifies the decision I had of just going Salah, despite the fact that during pre-season it seemed like Mane was the one that was a bit sharper.
Yeah, definitely. Salah definitely the one for me. So in terms of Leeds definitely a talking point. They seem to have a lot of value there. Dallas, one of the cheap defenders, getting an assist. Klitsch, Harrison, both 5.5 mids, both scoring. They do feel like definitely the best of the promoted teams and probably where some of the value is going to come from this season. I'm definitely considering Klitsch and Harrison in for Saint Maximin, who I just didn't think Saint Maximin looked at it. As someone in the chat said, Saint Maximin doesn't shoot, and I made the comparison that he looked a bit like Traore when Traore was a Middlesbrough a few seasons ago. He's great on the ball. He has great turn of pace, but he seems a bit scared in the final third that he doesn't want to. He had a great chance where he broke away from Fredericks and was through on goal, but he felt like he was scared, so he's had to slow down to try and pick up his options, which allowed uh, Fredericks to catch up with him. So definitely, definitely looking at as those options as my St Maximin replacement.
See, I've got a couple of other names I'm looking at, but Harrison and Klitsch definitely on there. Um, like Klitsch's late run into the box, I think they literally have Leeds 5 players forward when they get the ball in defence and pass it to Phillips. You literally have a line of 5, which I think is what Liverpool really struggled with. Hernandez and Klitsch kind of take the central roles either side of Bamford and kind of drop into the space for Phillips to find, but Klitsch seemed very able to find that late run into the box where he can cause some problems, and that's how he scored that volley.
Yeah,
Which I think we also need to give Costa some credit because that was a great ball as well by Costa. So he's someone
yeah,
I'm also looking at.
he's 5.5
Um,
as well. Yeah,
yeah, Phillips. If he keeps getting the ball in that pocket and keeps finding balls over the top to Harrison, he could be getting assists all season. He looks a really good player. Had that free kick that seemed to trouble the goalkeeper Allison
yeah,
for a bit there, even though it went just wide. And even like Koch at the back had a great pass on the back that went over the top to Harrison as well. So it seems like in certain games they definitely have that long ball over the top. And
yeah.
I know there's a lot of connotations about long ball football, but I thoroughly enjoyed some of the passes that were coming out that lead side that really caught Liverpool's high line out there. So yeah, lots of options in that lead side.
Yeah, definitely. My dryer is beeping, so I'm just going to go and turn that off. But I'm going to throw you one of the questions in the chat while I
Cool.
go and do
No
so.
worries.
The question is, do we like? We'll get to Everton, but do you prefer the combination of is Salah so essential that you prefer a 4.5 defender, or would you go with the likes of Dean and Bruno?
Okay, I'd have to say for me, no player is essential this season. Um, there's so many other expensive premium price midfielders that are going to do really well this season. You've got the likes of Bruno Fernandes, you've got the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, Raheem Sterling. So I actually think Trent is someone that, as long as this is a one game like anomaly, Trent is a very important player to have. So I'd almost say Liverpool defensive coverage, as long as you find the right one, is more important than owning someone like Salah.
Yeah,
Now, Salah is going to have game weeks where he scores a hat trick. You just can't avoid that. But then you're going to have game weeks where Sterling's the one that scores a hat trick, or Bruno Fernandes gets 2 goals and an assist. There's so many premium options that can do very well and score lots of points. Aubameyang. So I personally still am going to stick with a Liverpool defender. And if I really think the points are elsewhere, Salah would be the casualty for me. But there'd always be a way of getting him back in
yeah,
for good home fixtures.
yeah. I think so. As we were speaking about the penalties bit, for Mane Salah, just feels like there isn't a competition. If I thought that when they got priced that if Mane had been half a mil less at 11.5 or 11, it then is a decision that gets made. But as soon as they put them in at the same price, then it's a pretty no brainer for
Yeah.
between them. The next game, Newcastle West Ham, maybe less to say on this one apart from in a few options more on the Newcastle side. I thought Suchek, who I have, did exactly as I expected him to. People are not necessarily pleased with his performance, but that's how the team played. He plays as a box to box midfielder. He gets into the attack for 5 million. You can't really complain with that. He's great in the air. He had a header which went just wide. He could have scored. So for me, at 5 million, I think he's still a great value at that price to rotate into your team. I don't know what people expected more from him to be playing as a second striker or what, but definitely one that I'll look to keep. In terms of Newcastle, Hendrick with a goal and an assist. You had Wilson. They also looked all right defensively. So I suppose Lewis, Wilson, Hendrick, and St. Maximin's are the four that people are owning at the moment. You happy with Wilson?
Yeah, I'm happy with Wilson. He looks to offer them something that
Yeah,
Jolinton didn't. He was getting in behind plenty of times, and I think a big issue was the rest of the team weren't necessarily used to their striker getting into space behind the defence that often. Because there was a lot of times Wilson got the ball and there was just no one else up with him. And I
mm,
think with Fraser coming into the side, Fraser has
yeah,
played with him before, so they'll have a bit of an understanding already. And then the rest of the side will also get an understanding with him. And I think Wilson is definitely going to affect how that team is going forward. I think from just one game, he looks like a massive improvement on Jolinton. Lewis also looked dangerous, I've got to say. I'd be interested to see who gets that right back spot. I know Manquillo was playing there, and he did
yeah,
get in some dangerous positions, but didn't seem to have either the composure or the ability to make the most of it when he was further forward.
no,
And Hendricks just like he looked quite advanced, and he took his finish well. He was there to get the assist to Wilson. So yeah, I got
yeah,
to agree with pretty much all of your picks there.
yeah. The question is, someone's asking in the chat, nuclear is St. Maximin to Hendrick too much of a sideways move at 5.5 million? I do think that Hendrick offers a little bit more in that final third than St. Maximin. If I was picking one now, it would be a no-brainer who I go with. It does feel a bit sideways, and I do think there's probably others that I would look at as well. But if you've got a luxury of a transfer, then great. But I think it's a bit much of a sideways move for me.
I'd say right now you've got to ask yourself: is that the move that's going to get me the most
Yeah,
points short term? And I really don't think St. Maximin to Hendricks is going to be your most powerful move to make.
no,
Because don't get me wrong, we can always say this player is better than that player, a better pick. But you've got to think about your team. And if, for instance, bringing in a Man United player for a different player, like maybe you looked at Son and Spurs and thought, just no, that's not for me. I don't think they're going to have a good start to the season. And you want to bring in someone like Rodriguez because of their fixtures. You thought he looked on the ball. Everton looked great. You've got to look at where the biggest amount of points are going to be scored for you. And I just think Hendricks, although he looked good, and I could be wrong, isn't going to have that kind of
no,
performance every game week.
no. I agree. Fraser has scored tonight in the cup match for them. They're playing a sort of
Okay.
middle slash full strength. Wilson
See,
isn't
he
playing.
interests me at that price.
Yeah, yeah,
Fraser at six
definitely.
million, just like I know they went to Newcastle. I know they didn't have a great season last year, but when I saw their prices, I was like, that's probably fair. But I think it could definitely, throughout the season, seem like too cheap a price.
Yeah. So before we move on to the Sunday games, um, T Don't is asking, is Bamford at 5.5 million a good value? He doesn't have to do much to be value at that price. I think we need to straight away say that he's probably not going to start every game. Rodrigo has been signed to play up front for them, and I don't expect they're going to play two up front. So he's probably not going to play every game. And I put out a tweet earlier. He had, I think, the lowest XG out of any player that scored this weekend. He had two shots, one in the box, one on target, and he scored it. It was because of a Van Dijk mistake. You're not going to get that every week from him, and he's probably not going to play. So no, I don't think Bamford is a good pick at all. Anything
Yeah, I
else
have to
to add?
agree. Just his stats from last season,
No.
just he should have scored so many more in the championship than he did. He just he's in that side because of what he offers in that striker role that fits with Bielsa's system more than it is because he's a clinical finisher.
Yeah.
And to be fair, having looked at Rodrigo's stats, he's not necessarily a clinical finisher either,
No.
but they both offer what Bielsa needs in that role for the benefit of the whole team. And I personally think there'll be better value elsewhere in that lead sides than the two strikers.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, not a great ringing, not a very ringing endorsement for Bamford. But there's not
We
much
could
to.
both be proven wrong, but he's
Yeah.
been in the Premier League before. He
Oh,
didn't do it then.
no.
He's in a much better side now, I think,
Yeah.
with a much better like tactical system. But I just don't think that's what you get with Bamford.
No.
You don't get goals, and we've got to think of him as an FPL player. He could have a great season as far as an overall player, a bit like Firmino. Great player. Sometimes he can really control a
Yeah.
game and run a game with what he can offer for the likes of Salah and Mane to get on. But he's not the one getting the points, and
No.
we're in a game of points at the end of the day.
No, I agree. So onto West Brom, Leicester. Not much to really be said about West Brom. Johnson in goal looked not bad at a 4.5 mil goalkeeper, potential option later in the season, but very little to say about many of those players. Pereira looked all right, but at 6 mil, I think it's a push over what else is available at that price. Anyone in West Brom take your fancy, or we move on straight on to Leicester?
Well, I mean, I would give him a second chance purely because they played a 3-4-3, which seemed like a
Yeah,
tactical decision to counter Leicester
yeah,
that just didn't work. That's not a
yeah.
formation they generally played in the Championship. So I'd be interested to see them back in like a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, just to see if it changes things up a bit. But yeah, other than that, absolutely nothing on offer from them really. Mainly off Leicester City, the ones I was looking at.
Yeah, I agree. Leicester looked all right first half. It took them a while to get into it, but second half they did look really good. I know Vardy got his two penalties. Barnes looked very creative actually from open play. Barnes is the one that really took my fancy, and I think I'd pick Barnes before I picked Vardy. I know Vardy's on pens, but at that price, Barnes looks very good. And Madison, he looks like he's going to be back fit now. Came off the bench again at 7 million. Something else I really like there. If Justin is nailed, and we see when Pereira comes back that he's playing either at left back or at centre back in the three at the back, he's not a bad option. They didn't look dreadful defensively, but Barnes and Madison are the two that I'll be looking at probably from their option just because of value.
Yeah, the issue with Castan, I think, is the price range.
Yeah,
If he was bidding at 4.5, I'd probably make the risk of taking that as my move this game week. But even if it is a sideways move, he just looked very promising going forward. He looked like he was ready to drift into the box when the ball was out on the left. So I was quite impressed with Castan. Barnes, my issue with him is composure. He will definitely have games this year where he will score two or three because he's always getting in the right positions. But then when he does get in front of goal, he just doesn't seem to have that composure yet. And I think when that comes, he could potentially be a great force in FPL. But I think right now he's just missing it. He should have scored at least one
yeah,
this weekend. Vardy, I saw some really shocking stats for him as far as in open
yeah.
play. I think he didn't touch the ball in the box or something crazy like that, like
Yeah,
zero penalty
it
area
wasn't. Yeah,
touches.
it wasn't.
And
It
I was
wasn't
like,
good. It was very low. Yeah, I haven't seen them exactly, but
and
it
I
was. It
think that
wasn't
must be
great.
the highest score any FPL player has got. Such shocking underlying stats. So I think his XG, if you take out penalties, was really bad as well. So he does have the penalties though, and potentially, like we've already
Mm.
discussed, that could be a very important factor this season. But yeah, I'd have to say Barnes was the only one that really excited me in that game.
Yeah, I would potentially look at Madison when he does come back. He does tend to be consistent. He will be on corners for them, and we know when the likes of Evans and Soyuncu are both playing, they can offer something from there. And he does tend to be their most creative player. So I think at 7 million, he's not bad when we see good fixtures and good form from him, but probably not one that I'm jumping on at the moment. Um, Evening Mick saying that on my chat about Hendrick, I think this is referring to that there's no such thing
Yeah,
as a sideways move. I think that's probably I can understand that there's no such thing as a sideways move because you're moving from a worse to a better asset. But I think as JNO said, you've just got to think who is the best. Is that really the best way to use your transfer? There's probably better ways to use it than doing a move like that. So I would look at that. That feels too sort of like for like in terms of the points that they can offer you. That I think you're doing. There's better elsewhere.
yeah. So I'd liken it to if you were asking me, say, if you went Gomez to Robertson right now, I'd be like, yeah, go for it straight away
Yeah,
because there's a clear difference in my view of what they can potentially achieve season long and short term.
yeah,
Whereas off of one game, I can't go, yep, Hendricks is going to have a blinder of the season, make the move now.
yeah. No, I agree. So the other Sunday game, which came as a bit of a shock, I think, was Spurs nil, Everton 1. You've got Son and Calvert-Lewin in your team, so a bit of a bittersweet one for you there. Son, you plan on keeping him, or we'll start with Spurs?
I mean, I I at the beginning of the season I didn't really want Son, but he was there as a placeholder for who I would bring in later on, and because certain players didn't play, I was like, okay, we'll put Son in for Gameweek 1, see if he can get anything. So it almost like reinstated my thoughts that I don't really want any Spurs players. I don't
Yeah,
know what it is about me and Mourinho sides, but just they don't fill me with confidence of getting those returns. And they will get returns over the season, but I just feel like there's better options out there. So in a way, it's made my call on him a lot easier, unless they do something crazy against Southampton. If I do keep him for one more game week, so I wouldn't actually say it was too bittersweet. I was a lot happier with DCL scoring, and I think if both had scored, I'd still be happier with the DCL goal.
yeah,
And I think for me, it's all about Everton. If they can do that again in the next fixture, look that much in control, then I think it'll definitely be someone from Everton coming in BCL potentially because they've got good fixtures.
yeah. Do you have any money in the bank? Because I know you spoke that you weren't that keen on Rashford, but if you can't stretch to Bruno because you're wanting to keep Salah, is Son to Rashford crossed your mind?
Unfortunately, I don't have any money in the bank because I changed from I think I was on Mitrovic and I changed to Wilson last minute. So I did have point 0.5 in the bank, but then I just thought Wilson looked more promising.
Yeah,
I felt like West Ham was a fixture to potentially target because of the unrest there. So it's a bit annoying not to have that point 0.5 to make the move easier for me. But the fact that Mitrovic didn't start kind of helped
yeah,
make that easier pill to swallow that I didn't have money in the
yeah.
bank. So yeah, I don't have money in the bank, unfortunately.
Would you consider that if you want to keep the likes of Salah and then go Aubameyang? So next week, I mean, you could do De Bruyne Rose. So I suppose you couldn't. Well, I was going to say Aubameyang to De Bruyne and Son up to Rashford, but you would
Yeah, I
be
mean, I'm
zero
open
point
next game week
0.1
to doing
short.
free transfers, so I could
Yeah,
always figure out a way to save the money somewhere else. Um,
yeah,
I just feel like if I'm going United, I want Martial or Bruno. Rashford's not a
mm,
terrible option, but I just feel like Martial is starting to become the player that he was
yeah,
signed to become, and Bruno Fernandes is just coming in. The fact that penalties could be so important this season, and Man United were the highest uh, winners of penalties last season with a record-breaking amount of penalties, I just think Bruno or Martial is the best move.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I've got Martial and I'm happy with him. I will get 1 point less for a goal and all that, but he's just always involved, being in that up front striker position now. He's always in it. So Everton, we'll talk about their midfield, but if we do start with Calvert-Lewin, Nuclear Atoms asked in the chat, with the midfield behind him now, and Calvert-Lewin looking to be the focal point, playing as a one striker, which is what he did at the weekend. Where do we reckon he can reach? 10 plus goals? Where's his ceiling? I mean, 10 plus goals is scoring one in every four. If they play as they are, I'd expect Calvert-Lewin to hit 15 goals.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I just think with the quality that's now behind him, you have to think he didn't even get his goal from an assist from Rodriguez or any of the new players. He got his goal from an
Or
assist from
Richarlison
Digne. Yeah.
squaring it
Oh,
when he's through on goal. Don't
he could have had two.
He
Like,
should have had
but
to.
I just think with that quality behind him now, I think he will get more goals this season.
Mm,
I'm still not an advocate for him as a finisher. I don't think he's necessarily that clinical,
no,
but I think he's just going to have that many chances created for him that he should be getting at least around, I'd say, 13, 14 goals minimum.
yeah,
So aiming for that field mark, I think. The only thing that worried me was Richarlison just had such better underlying stats, a lot more
mm,
chances. Yes, he didn't convert any
yeah,
of them, and at the end of the day, that's what we want. Um, Richarlison's always been a player that just kind of
yeah,
always seems like a good option, but I can never really pull the trigger. And a lot of times he doesn't actually perform when I haven't pulled the trigger. So
yeah.
he's one I've got a bit of a, I'd say, a biased. So I wouldn't necessarily come to
Yeah,
me as far as Richarlison's
no,
concerned.
I
But
agree.
Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I'm excited about.
No, I agree with that. yeah, not one that I'm overly keen on going in at the moment. In terms of their midfield, do you fancy Rodriguez as an option? I mean, I think half a mil saved on Calvert-Lewin. I know they're different positions, but I'd rather that than James Rodriguez. He does look like a great player, though.
Yeah, I'd need to see more goal threat from him. I don't think
Yeah,
he necessarily had the greatest goal threat in that game. He had 3 shots, but his expected goals in that game was 0.05. So I definitely think it could become part of the season where we're thinking, okay, we now need to get Rodriguez in. But right now, I'm happy to just have the man leading the line at Everton and hope that a lot of it goes
yeah,
through him.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. Ollie Watkins has apparently scored again, so that's 2-2 for him at Villa. Does look like a good signing for them. He's 6 million as well, so could see something from him this season. Grealish putting on the
Yeah, I
plate
think
for him.
Grealish, exactly. Grealish and Watkins as a partnership. I think Aston Villa, whilst there was definitely strong points to the forwards they signed last season, I think Ollie Watkins could potentially be an upgrade on both of them. And it'd be interesting to see Villa. I think now they've managed to stay up last season. I want to see a couple of games from them, but there could definitely be some. I think Trezeguet had a great end to
Mm.
last season as well. So I'm interested in the assets. McGinn's back, and there
Yep.
was a time beginning of the season last year when a lot of people of us were on Aston Villa players, either Grealish or McGinn. So I'm definitely interested in seeing how that progresses. But I won't
Yeah.
make the move just yet. I think there's just too many important moves to make with the likes of Man U and Man City coming back into the fold.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I saw a clip McGinn of the Watkins goal, and McGinn was playing in that same role we loved him for. Sort of that seemed to be a second striker at times. So he was playing that, so he could be an option. But I think there's better ways of using your transfers at the moment. So the second last game, we've got Sheffield United Wolves. I had Vinagre and Stevens, two players scoring me a total of 1 point between them. So was not, and I turned it off after 15 minutes when Sheffield United conceded twice. I was like, there's no point me watching this anymore. It's an interesting one. I think Wolves' fixtures after that City game were really nice. A Wolves defender, and I'm looking at Says because he seemed to be playing in an overlapping centre back role, like we see from the Sheffield United ones. Hit the post as well as his header. I really like their fixtures going forward. Another one is Podence that people are talking about in that 5 mil, 5.5 mil bracket. Fancying any of those? You've only got Vinagre in your team at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. I took the risk.
Yeah,
Just the way that the press conference went, it sounded like, well, he's probably going to get some starts until either they decide to drop him or not. I thought he'd at least get the first 2 or 3 game weeks, and it turns out I was wrong there. I
yeah.
didn't actually see the game, so I've heard that Size looks good. I heard that Podence looked good, but I can't really comment too much on it purely because I didn't see it. But I wasn't expecting a 2-0 victory, to be fair, for Wolves. I thought it'd be a much tighter game than that.
Yeah, it was quite tight once Sheffield United realised where they were and what was going on, but they would just fell a bit asleep for the first 20 minutes when they conceded twice. The rest of it, they were sort of back to their usual selves. My worry with Pedance is the amount of wingers that they've got. Traore's not going to play this
Yeah,
season at right
rotation.
back. He's not going to play a season there. Then they've got Jota, Neto, Traore, and Pedance all rotating for either two or one spot if they're playing, that 4-5-2-1-2. So it just worries me that his rotation is going to get rotated this season.
Yeah, yeah, definitely agree.
Perfect. So we've gone through them. I suppose we didn't touch on Jimenez, a player who actually went under the radar a lot. We know he can be consistent. Scored a good goal at the weekend. Their fixtures up coming up are quite nice. I just think he's going to tick along quite nicely again. 8.5. He could easily prove his value at that price again.
I think
Fancying
he's
him or are others?
he's not exciting pick. That's what I think the
No.
problem is because he tends to score just one, and you have players like Ings that could go and score 2 or 3. But I think a big thing to consider is they don't need to be explosive if you're not planning to have them in your captaincy equation.
Mm,
So someone like a Jimenez or even a Madison, those players that kind of tick over slowly, there's nothing wrong with owning them because all you want from them is to score points regularly. They don't need to
yeah.
be big point scorers, just regular point scorers. So Jimenez is someone I criminally overlooked. I was just like, it's either Ings or go cheaper or more expensive. So someone I overlooked, and I often overlook him purely because he doesn't tend to have those explosive
Yeah.
matches. But that's a fault of mine because he has consistently been one of the best strikers in the league.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there will be times where we want Jimenez, and I think he'll probably stay about that 8.5 because I think it's high enough up that you've got to think about getting him in. It's not just that straightforward pick because of other players at that price like Ings and Martial. But there's definitely reasoning to own him. Just tick along nicely. Onto the final game of the game week. Probably quite a lot to talk about this. Brighton 1, Chelsea 3. Brighton looked really good in this. I don't know if you did watch it. Lamperty especially, 4.5 mil in defence, got forward very nicely, picked up an assist. Okay, that was one of those assists where he passed it sideways and Trossard shoots from outside the box and manages to find the corner. One of those assists, but he did look really good and very attacking. So with good fixtures, he's definitely one that I'm considering for them. Anyone else from
Yeah, I
Brighton? Trossard playing as a second striker as well seemed to be as well not a bad option.
I think for me, the only one that really stood out was Lamptey. I think easier fixtures, he could get clean sheets. Definitely looks like an attacking threat, and it looks like he's got something to prove. And I always prefer to bring in players that look like they want to do something in the game. And he always, every time he
Yeah,
got on the ball, it looked like he wanted to affect the game. I've I've always been on and off with Trossard. Just he can look brilliant at times, and then he can be really quiet in other games. So I think Trossard has a long way to go to convince me, purely because of previous attempts to bring him in have
yeah,
just failed quite miserably. I also do worry about rotation in that Brighton side. Sometimes he just decides to play other
yeah.
players
He
than
does.
Trossard. So for me, other than Lamptey, there wasn't much on offer in that Brighton side.
Yeah, I agree. So then on to Chelsea, one that's talked about a lot. I suppose it's worth noting that Ziyech probably not going to be back, and Pulisic again feels like he's had a setback in training, so probably not going to be ready for game week 2. So it does kind of feel like it's fallen down to James and Werner, and then Havertz as well. Although Havertz looked quite off it on Monday night. I imagine he's going to get better with time with the team, but off that performance, I wouldn't be bringing him in. So it kind of feels like Werner and James are the two that I'm looking at. But again, James could easily fall out of the team for Azpilicueta 1 week if he wants a more defensively minded team or what. So James, although we have a lot of potential to score goals, Chelsea, I just feel like Werner is the only one that I'm looking at.
No, I'll have to agree. I think I heard that Havertz had a decent start. I caught the game about, say, 20 minutes in, and I watched the rest of it. Um, but I heard Havertz didn't look too bad right off the bat, and then kind of just
Yeah.
lost his place in the game. Was he playing on the right wing
Yeah, so his
and
positioning
kind
will
of drifted
change when
in?
everyone's back fit, but we don't. I mean, I hope he plays Hudson-Odoi out wide and puts Mount out
That's
wide
what I
and
was thinking.
puts. Yeah, but Lampard does. If a team wins, he doesn't change the team. So I imagine we could see Havertz out wide again, but I hope he puts Mount and out wide and puts in Hudson-Odoi from the start.
Because it was Loftus Cheek that was playing in the centre, wasn't it? And I
Yeah,
just felt like there was times when Loftus Cheek could have really affected the game and just
yeah,
didn't. I don't know if it's rust or whatever, or maybe he's too advanced, too far forward. But it just felt like Havertz should be the one right behind Werner.
yeah.
And then Mount and Hudson Odoi out wide. But it's Lampard's decision at the end of the day. I'm not going to affect it. And Werner definitely looked hungry for goals. He got himself in a great position that Ruben Loftus-Cheek couldn't find the through ball to him,
Mm.
and you could see he's got that pace that when Chelsea are on the counter, if the Chelsea side get used to finding him the ball, I think he could start to score a lot.
Yeah,
So I think Werner's the one for me right now.
yeah, definitely. Loftus-Cheek didn't look good at all. Was quite pleased when he came off. So that sort of rounds up the games. You've now got a few questions in the chat to rattle through before we go to the final um, roundup. So the first one coming in: Havertz to Rashford. Would you do that this week or would you wait until a couple of game weeks to see if Havertz can find his feet?
I suppose it really depends on if you've got any Man United coverage at all, and if you've got Werner.
Mm,
If you have Werner and you want Man United coverage, I can't argue with that move at all.
yeah,
Like I've already said on the stream, I prefer myself, Martial and Bruno, but
mm,
Rashford's still going to be an important player for Man United. So, yeah, definitely can't argue. I do think Havertz is one that could potentially hit the ground running in a Liverpool game. He's a quality player, and we've seen him perform in the Bundesliga against some big sides as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say just off of one performance we can go, okay, until the others come back, Havertz isn't going to be that good. Because I
yeah,
think he could definitely impress us in a game or two. But I can't
yeah,
argue with the move if you've got Werner.
yeah. I agree. The next one is within Everton. Are any of their midfielders taking your fancy? Decore, I think he's priced in at 5.5 or 6, so a bit cheaper than Rodriguez. Potentially looking at him because we know what he can do box to box in the Watford side when he was there.
Well, from the tactic formation at the beginning of the game, it suggested that Decore was right behind Calvert Lewin, but I didn't really notice that in game.
No.
I feel like they got the formation completely wrong as far as what they said Everton were playing. But Rodriguez was on the right, so I suppose he could be quite far forward. We know he can
Yeah.
get into the box at the right time. We know he has a long shot in him. So, what is Decore's price? Is
Um,
it 5.5 or is it 6?
uh, if he's 5.5, I think he's worth considering if he's playing in that role. But if he's 6, then I wouldn't. Let's just have a look.
5.5.
I don't.
You know,
Okay,
I
so
really like that at 5.5, to be fair.
yeah, that's not bad actually. That's put into another 5.5 mil mid. That's really nice. His price actually.
I'd say definitely with
Yeah.
Everton's
So
current fixtures, I
mm,
think that could be a decent shout.
yeah, I
But
like that a
do
lot.
you have a transfer to make that could be more effective than,
Yeah.
say, I'm assuming it'd be St. Maximin to Decore or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you have a
True.
transfer that'd be more impactful?
True. Next one from Mctavius. Would you be selling your Spurs assets until Spurs' performance improve? I suppose all of these questions are if I've got nothing better to do with my transfers. I think again that's a bit of a luxury with them at Southampton at the weekend, but you just Spurs are so hit and miss that I just wouldn't want to be owning them. I think Son and Doherty, especially for the same price, you're getting pretty much you're getting Werner, you're getting Martial, you're getting Rashford, you're getting Pulisic at the same price. For me at the moment, they're better picks than Son. And then in that midfield, the likes of Tierney, Dean are looking like better picks than Doherty at the moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, if there wasn't a blank game week in game week 1, I can guarantee you I'd have had no Spurs in my side
Yeah,
unless it was a Dyer or a Davies at 5 million because I thought they were going to keep some clean sheets. There's out of the top 6 sides, and even if you go and now put Everton and Wolves in there, I just feel like there's better attacking options out there than the ones that Mourinho picks right now.
yeah,
So yeah, there's something about that Spurs side I'm not interested in.
yeah, I agree. Just the last few, would you be, if you have Jimenez in your team now, would you be making the swap to Martial, or would you be waiting to sort of game week 6, 7 time?
I mean, it's always difficult when your players actually score points for
Yeah,
you. Um, with Wolves, you've got West Ham and Fulham, game week 3 and 4,
yeah,
and then Leeds. They've got good fixtures. I know Man City doesn't particularly look very tasty, but you could still get a goal in that as well.
yeah,
So I would struggle to get rid of
yeah.
Jimenez.
I'd
If I had Ings in that position, it would be easy. But I just feel like this season, Wolves, especially with no Europe to focus on as well,
yeah,
and they've got a strong squad. I know they've lost Doherty and they don't have Johnny, and so that was a bit why I didn't necessarily go up to someone like Sice in Wolves'
yeah,
defence because I was like, they've lost their 2 first-team fullbacks. I was a bit worried that might affect how they were defensively, but then we went and saw what Sice did. So I now want Wolves defenders again. But I just think Jimenez has done well enough that with those fixtures after game week 2, you might as well keep him in. Could see a nice
yeah.
price rise in him as well.
I agree. Fantasy Football Focus is asking, should you watch Spurs All or Nothing? Yes, I've watched 3 episodes of it. Definitely
I've not
worth
watched
giving
it
it a
yet.
watch if you've got it. It's worth it. It is worth it. It is a good laugh. Mourinho, having had him as a Chelsea manager, it is good seeing him like the behind the scenes. I met him once at a restaurant. He was very nice, but it's just another light into management. It is really interesting, so I do recommend it. We were talking about that Havertz to Rashford move earlier, and the person Chris asking it has Werner and no United. So yeah, Havertz to Rashford does look like a good move. The final question that we'll go with, a bit of a light-hearted ones. Your thoughts on sour sweets?
I'm not really a sweets guy, to be fair.
Oh,
So even like sweets, I'm not that fussed about them. I prefer chocolate. Sorry.
I agree. I prefer a chocolate to a sweet, but I'm a fan of a sour sweet every so often. It's got to be the right time and a place. But right,
And we're talking
that
house
is a
sour. That's the thing.
mm,
House sour, because there's some very sour sweets out
yeah.
there.
No, I'm not going that far. But that's all we had time for this evening. If you don't already, while you're just watching this, please drop a like on the video and subscribe if you are new. Please follow myself and JNO as well over on Twitter. All the links are in the descriptions, as well as subscribing to JNO on FPL today. But thank you very much for joining me this evening. Much appreciated. Good luck with your game week 2. Any final parting words?
It's only game week 1, lads. Don't worry. It's a long season.
Perfect. Yeah, patience is key. You might have had a bad game week 1, but it is the hardest game week of the lot probably because you just don't know what's going to happen. It's only up from here. But thanks for joining, everyone. We'll be back with a few videos later this week and a stream again next week on Tuesday, same time, same place. But thanks, guys, and I will see you all next week. Cheers, all.